Well, hello everybody, Keith here again. Not done an orchid video for a little while. And this time I'm going to replace the moss on two of my orchids. The problem with moss is when you first use it, it's soft and it absorbs a lot of water and retains a lot of water. And that can cause some problems for some orchids if you want to use it. But if you leave it for a few months to a year, say, you're going to end up with something that is like this. This is Gomesa crispa. I've had it for several years now. It's not doing too badly. Got lots of roots in the top. And it's got some very, very long roots too. But they're not going down into the pot, which means, because this is quite sensitive to that, I've noticed that the bark's not very good. Well, I can replace the bark easily enough. But this moss, as you can see here, roots have gone right down into it, and this thing does like moisture, but it's like a biscuit. I don't want to just try and strip that moss off those roots, or else I'll end up with no roots left at all. So I've got to soak it first. So I'll get some water, ordinary rainwater, and it's been here in the conservatory. You can see there, look, it's not trying to absorb any moisture, it's just floating everything off. But that will still soften it quite a bit. Now this is one of my Rostrapias, Rostrapia falkenbergii. Very pretty little flower, very small flower, but quite pretty. And you can see that I've got some really nice leaves here, but look at the number of concertinaed leaves, which means it is not getting adequate hydration. Some people say it's a lack of humidity. I don't think so. I think that is a lack of hydration when it's just not keeping enough moisture, and the same is going to apply to that. That's perhaps not quite as bad, but it's a bit of a shame because this one, it was doing absolutely nothing. I'll do the same with this one. Wet this moss and try and get it so I can get it off without damaging too much. It was doing absolutely nothing, and it would kind of kill or cure. I'll put it in this thing. It's actually the bottom half of a tiny little terrarium. There's an upper thing. It looks a bit like a glass egg when it's all together. But it outgrew that. It did really, really well. Grew much better in there. It obviously likes it in this sort of style. I don't like moss. Not really. Not if I can avoid using it, but not really in this case. So I'll let that one soak for now. And let's have a look if this has changed anything under here. Well, it's certainly not as rigid as it was. And I can get rid of that. I can go over there out of the way. And it is starting to come away from these roots. But as I say, I've got to be incredibly careful when I'm doing this, because it would be the easiest thing in the world for me to just snap all this lot off, because they are, I don't know whether they branch. They don't appear to be branching at the moment, but we've only got a couple of roots coming through, so these must branch somewhere under the pot, but they are very long. And I say, this thing does like to put out very, very long roots. And when it's growing well, these roots just absolute little root monster. This is, I had all the branching, look. So they do branch. But there's no real sign. Oh, there is a little bit of green here and there, but there's no great sign of anything happening with these roots here. There's one or two new roots coming up there. So, right, having got that out the way, I'll get rid of that water. And now, let's see about taking this off. That's been done for not quite a year. It was done at the end of April, and it's now it is 13 months. I beg your pardon. That was 24th of April 2025, and it's currently the 31st of May 2026. So I say around about a year. Let's get rid of a lot of this. There's a lot of root in here. A lot of root. What? And how well you can see it. There's really quite a lot of root down in the pot. And it seems to be stuck. So what I find as a general rule is if you've got roots that are stuck to a surface, whether it's bark or plastic pot or anything like that, the best thing to do is soak it again. Give it some more water, let it soak. I mean, you've got to remember that these things, virtually, not quite, but virtually all the orchids in the hobby are what's called epiphytes. They live on the bark of trees. They do not parasitise the trees. They simply use the bark as an attachment point. And that... Now, will you come out? Will you? Oh, don't like the sound of that. Oh, I've not done too bad. Quite pleased with the results of that. I've not lost too many of those roots. You can't avoid damage altogether. You can do your level best. You can do everything you can to try and minimise it, but there's no way on earth you're ever going to manage to do much good with that. Let's see if I can get rid of the rest of it. That's come out okay, and then we've got some pieces of old bark. The bark's less of a problem. This bark is not that bad, but as you can see, we've got a lot of root, which is obviously good. Some of it isn't great. We have got some new roots coming through there, but I could do with getting rid of some of this old leaves and such like. But I'm not going to get too heavily involved in it. That's a very old root, that one, I can tell you. But I'm going to take that off. It isn't doing any good. And all it's doing is going down into the pot and not really helping the plant at all. And the rest of it is more or less on the top. So I'm going to just ease these roots out. Right, so have a look at see which of these are actually doing any good. There's a few that have lost the tip, so that one isn't actually live. It does show one of the things about orchid roots though. The root is actually that very thin piece at the end. and the rest of it is a coating that retains water, because an awful lot of these, living in tropical climates, it rains pretty much every day, but it doesn't rain all the time. It'll rain, it'll stop, and you don't get any more rain till the following day. So what that means in practical terms is you've got to store water for perhaps 22 hours or something like that. Well, okay, so you've got to absorb very, very quickly, and they turn green. You can see this one has turned green. Some of these others have gone brown, which has probably got more to do with the moss staining it. Another one there that's not very good. Take the end of that off. But by and large, the roots on that are quite good. And I hope once I've got these back in some fresh bark and tried to, well, I don't know whether they'll tease. I mean, is that even going to go back into this pot? I think what I'm going to do with all of this lot is try and get it into the pot. Bit like that tip I saw ages ago was, if it doesn't fit very well, screw it round and the roots will simply fold up. So now I need to get some more small bark. And I've got some small bark in a bag over here, and it's the usual kind of repotting thing that you do with most orchids. Just try and pack the bark in amongst the roots and let them find the way. Push it in with your fingers, try and not to leave any voids. So that's nothing different. The difference is going to be that once this thing's happy, it'll start pushing roots out of the bottom, because they do seem to be extremely thirsty little plants. So, but the flowers are quite interesting when you get them. I've reflowered this a couple of years now. Again, having not got anywhere with it for ages until I stood it on some moss to try and give it some longer term moisture. Now, I don't think it needs a base that big. I don't think it needs a base that big now. I've got most of the roots inside like that. So instead of using that one which it came out of, so I've got some moss over here that was already prepared. Although what I'm going to do beforehand is I'm going to water the bark, because that moss is already soaked. So that's just poured a bit of water through that plant. And all I'm going to do now is put some moss in the bottom of here. This is just dried moss that you can buy in a lot of garden centres. So you can get it from orchid suppliers like Spiceotic Plants or Burnham Nurseries. There's two examples that I use. So basically that will do quite nicely, I think. I can screw that down into the thing. It sits on the windowsill like that, so the thing comes through, and all I've got to do now is put a new date on that, and I haven't got the pen here to do that. So I'll do that in a bit. So that's one done. This one, I've got a feeling, is going to be a bit trickier. Let's empty this water out, because I've got a feeling I've got, what do you call it? Perlite mixed in with it. I don't know how long this has been in here, it's probably quite a little while. But can I get it to come out? Yep. So I put a layer of perlite in the bottom to try and let it drain and act as a bit of a sump. But you can see that it's just not keeping the moisture right in here. And again, I'm going to have to be very careful how I do this. It doesn't want to come apart, which means it's full of roots. Ooh, this is going to be fun. I thought it might be. Gently, Keithy, gently. Now then. Yes, there's a lot of root gone in here. You can see the roots starting to appear. Oh, isn't this going to be fun? I didn't think the roots on Restrapias got like this. This is a bit of a surprise to me, I've got to say, but this is absolutely full of roots. It's obviously really like this. I don't think I want to do a lot more than perhaps just replace some of this on the top where it's got algae in it. Because to be honest, although this moss has been in for quite a long time, I think the perlite in the bottom has helped preserve it. But I really, really wish I could have got to it. I've got a horrible feeling I'm going to end up with bits of Restrapia all over everywhere. If I'm not ever so careful. But something isn't right. It's not been working properly for a little while, I think. You can see this is much more difficult to do because this is just on top of the thing. You can see the roots here, running out the base of this one, and bright green, so they're obviously active. We've got other roots that are looking for somewhere to dig into. Hey. This is proving surprisingly difficult. The roots have infiltrated into this moss ridiculously well. You obviously like this environment, but now you can see how twisted these leaves are, it basically means that the roots aren't getting enough moisture. Now, whether that means I've got too much plant in this area, I honestly don't know, because it is quite a restricted area. But we know that this is the way they want to grow, because there's the evidence of it. So I don't know whether the perlite's got anything to do with it or what, but oh dear, I could spend hours and hours and hours teasing this lot out, I think. So easily done. So easily done. But it's pointless losing sleep over it, because you're going to do it. I think I'm going to have to give it best at that. So put a good layer of perlite in the bottom, because I think that will, as I say, give it a sump, so you can put water in, put moss on top, and any water that I use will go through the moss and into that, and then the moss can soak it back up again. Yeah, that's what an individual kind of plant looks like. See what we can do with that afterwards. But I think, really, I can't. Oh, excuse me. I'm not sure how I can do this and look after it properly, because this is already getting to the point that's coming off as well. It's not separated out. If I'm not careful, I'm going to end up with leaves and plants buried and all sorts, which I obviously don't want to do. Just like the other one with the bark, I don't want any empty spaces. I'm just going to try and put this in as best I can, and then push it down, but not too much. If you start compressing moss, you'll give yourself a problem before you've ever so much as drawn breath. So that is that pot done, and hopefully that will help. There's one of those flowers. There were a couple of flowers on here. There was a bud somewhere. Have I knocked that off? I hope not. But I can't actually see that at the moment. Unless it's on one of these. No, I don't know what I've done with that one then. I perhaps knocked it off. But yeah, that's Restrepia falkenbergii. And one of the problems you've got with Restrepias is they grow a bit like stolons, I suppose you call them, a bit like a strawberry. And then they put roots and leaves and things out from there. So let's hope I can do something with those. Now then, let's take that one that I had before. Now, because these like a little bit more moisture than a lot of plants, a lot of orchids, they are, I think it's Restrepias, there's one or two that live in the cloud forests where humidity is 100% practically all the time. And normally that would be a death knell for orchids, and it would be for these. If I was careless and just dumped these in water, they you know, what have you, they would just be dead in no time at all. Because up in the cloud forest, it's very, very windy. Up in the Andes, very windy indeed. And it means that when they, although the moisture is there and it's very humid and all the rest of it, the moisture doesn't actually stay on the plant. It just, and I want to do with this what I did with those others when I first put them in. I'm just going to lay them on the top and let the roots do their own thing. And those will either go or not go. That one I'm going to just very slightly, just so that it stands upright a little bit better. So, that's done some repots of Gamesa crispa and my Restrepia falkenbergii. And thank you for watching. I hope that's had a little bit of interest. And I will see you soon. Okay then, I'm back looking at the Restrepias. I put this little piece into this pot and I hope it would work. It hasn't, it's drying out incredibly fast. What I thought I would do is try and use this. Now, the other one that has done very, very well, when I first put it in, it wasn't even as big as this one. And it sat on top of the glass bowl that we already got. So I'm hoping that if I can move this slightly, put some more water on here to make this more mobile, and then somehow slide this lot in underneath there, it will give it some, or retain the moisture, which it definitely needs. And with us going away on a cruise for 2 weeks very shortly, if it dries out like this, it'll be as dead as a very dead thing when we get back. So I've got to do something with it fairly quickly. And you can see that the moss is not wonderful stuff for taking up Sorry, I've got this on a thing hanging around my neck to try and do it hands-free. So if I can, I've got it like that, there's moisture underneath. It's not ideal at that. I'm going to have to lose some of that moisture, at least. I want this stuff, the white stuff, to act as a bit of a sump to try and get it so that, so if I can pull that in there like that, and then very carefully put this over the top. Little data stick in as well. Something after that fashion. I hope that will keep a lot of that moisture inside that glass bowl, and it'll then act as a kind of terrarium. It'll just go round and round and evaporate and settle on this and come down again. And it was this that actually, or this style of growing it, which actually turned the other one around. So I'm hoping that by doing this, it'll not only preserve it until we get back from the cruise, but it will help get it going. So I'll end up with two Restrepia falkenbergii. So just a tail end, an addendum to the previous video. When something doesn't work, do something about it.